Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Nicole Zafian, and I'm the Head of Content and Education here at CLOC. We're thrilled to bring you today's Solution Lab, Building an Internal Investigation Factory to Speed Data Production with our presenting sponsor, Disco. Before we get started, a couple of things. You might already know and be familiar with the platform, but just in case, we have our chat feature so you can engage with each other, share your thoughts, share your comments or ideas around the conversation that you're hearing. And then we also have our Q&A. So both Kristen and Meredith will take your questions today during their presentation. So make sure any questions that you have, go ahead and throw them into the Q&A box throughout as they come to you, and Kristen will be monitoring that for their discussion. We're also recording today's session, so you'll be able to rewatch it anytime, and a link will be sent out following this session in an email, and feel free to share that with any of your peers that you think might be interested. With that, I want to again welcome you for joining us, and thank you to our amazing sponsor, Disco, for putting together this presentation. I'd like to hand it over to Disco's Vice President of Product Strategy, Kristen Zermhall. Kristen?
Thank you so much. I am delighted to be here with Meredith once again to talk about investigations and what her firm has been able to accomplish through hard work and a great partnership together, leveraging technology to build that internal investigations process. As we mentioned, my name is Kristen Zermhall. I'm the Vice President of Product Strategy at Disco. And in my role, I work with our customers and prospects to identify how to solve their challenges with technology, either existing technology through partnerships or what we're building at Disco for the future. I will turn it over to Meredith to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about the incredible history of Shearman and Sterling.
Thank you, Kristen. So I am Meredith Williams-Range. I am the Chief Knowledge and Client Value Officer with Shearman and Sterling. I have been here a whopping 3.5 years, is what I shall say. I am a lawyer by trade. I have been a lawyer for 20 years. I spent 18 years with a different firm and then transitioned over to Shearman, as I said, a little over 3 years ago, to run what we call the client value team of the firm. And there's a lot of components that go into what we defer to as the client value team, everything from data governance to data analytics to all of our conflicts and anti-money laundering and ethics group, to our knowledge and research team, to our legal project management and pricing team. It's a good chunk of people, and our role is always focused on how do we bring the right value both to the organization as well as to our clients, and how do we protect both, and making certain that we're always focusing upon that. Shearman is a firm that is 150 years old right now. And sometimes that age shows, and sometimes it doesn't. But what our senior managing partner will say often to me is we are a law firm in kind of transition, a law firm in cultural change, and really kind of making certain that we still deliver at the highest quality level of expertise to our clients, but we're innovative in how we do that. And that's really been the critical focus over my period of time with Shearman, is focusing on that focusing on how we do things better, how do we produce things faster with the same level of expertise and quality. So I feel very lucky to be in the position that I am in at Shearman.
Well, thank you so much, Meredith. And I just want to reiterate to folks that are listening out there, please do feel free to use the chat function to ask us questions. We love talking about this stuff and hearing from others. And so please don't forget that technology is available to you. Meredith, one of the things that I love about working with you is just what you've discussed, and that culture, that innovative culture of that law firm. And you've recognized it. We've certainly recognized it just in the way in which Disco can partner with the firm. And now you're being recognized all over the place for that innovation. And so I wanted to congratulate you on the New York Legal Awards for Innovative Law Firm. And your recent shortlisting on the Financial Times Innovative Award as well. It's amazing to see this recognition and just how quickly the firm has been able to develop such the pedigree of an innovative firm, and it's being recognized all over the place. Why don't you tell us, do you want to say anything about the specific awards that you received?
Yeah, I will absolutely say something about the New York Law Journal Award that we won a few weeks ago for being an innovative law firm, and then today getting the notice around the Financial Times for North America. Very exciting to be shortlisted in great company. what I will say is a lot of times when you're in a company of any size, you feel like change is like turning the Titanic an inch. Yeah. And a lot of times that's what it feels like. So we're very humbled by the recognition. It's kind of the last thing on our mind. We've just kind of really been keeping our heads down for the past few years and just really trying to deliver. One of my mantras is you execute with excellence with what's in your control. And that's what we've been focused on, is executing with excellence on this strategy. The strategy submitted for both awards was what we deem Shearman Analytics, which is a holistic data program. And in that data program, it's focused on future-proofing your collections of your data and finding the right technology partners and processes to do that appropriately, governing all of that data with the myriad of laws and regulation and client obligations that we have, but then coming to the fun stuff and the sexy stuff of analyzing it, so that way you can really get to predictive nature of what you can do with it next. So we're extremely humbled by the awards and the nominations and such. It's a lot of hard work and a very large team effort. I speak for many in those efforts. But thank you so much, Kristen, for bringing that up. I really appreciate that. It's been an interesting couple of weeks. So we'll take that great news.
Yeah, I mean, it's so wonderful just to hear about, in our previous Ask the Expert panel, you talked a little bit about the work that's been done over the course of the past 3 years. And so it's awesome to see that recognition at these institutions. It's obviously well-deserved. In the group chat, Sam and Heather and Betsy are all congratulating you and cheering. So we appreciate it.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much for that. It's appreciated.
Yeah, and now that was the outcome of a 3-year journey. As you mentioned, the past few weeks have now been a little bit different, and your focus has been more in the near term and in the immediate term because of some of the investigative work that you've been undertaking. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what's been going on in the past couple of weeks and how the firm is responding?
Sure. So let me set the stage by stating this first. Investigations are not exclusive to law firms. It is something that happens at every company that exists. What I'm really referencing is what any kind of general counsel is faced with, what any legal operations team is going to be faced with. At any given moment, you're going to have to conduct an internal investigation. The reasons behind that could be many. It could be that you have a right to be forgotten. It could mean that you have employee attrition. It could be that you've got a data breach. It could be that you've got a third-party data breach. It could be any number of reasons as to why you're needing to conduct that. So I just want to set that stage that my perspective, although being from a law firm, it's really any company can take on kind of what the analysis that we've undergone and the learnings that we've had. So let me say it this way: learn from our mistakes. Learn from our struggles and take it and do better things with it is really what I'll say. So what we have learned, and really over the past few weeks, but even a while back before then, is that we were not fully prepared to conduct an internal investigation in a fashion that would deliver results quickly. And we had really fantastic people at the organization who each knew their role to play, but we were not connected in the right fashion. And more importantly, we did not have the right technology or the right outside partnerships in place to help us in that journey of internal investigations. So, Kristen references the past few weeks. At any given moment, every one of us are going to have an investigation. I've had an internal investigation going on for the past 3 weeks. It's not been my favorite period of time at my career at Shearman, but it is something that we all have to undergo. It's involving a third party and potential risk of data loss by that third party and us managing that. And again, understanding the regulation and the client obligations associated with any of that. So it's stressful. Is what I will say the past few weeks have been. But finding that process, finding and streamlining your people, and finding the right partnerships is very critical and has been very critical for Shearman in how we've developed what we kind of refer to as a machine of investigatory work. And creating that has been allowed us to be very efficient in how we respond, whereas typically a third-party investigation similar to what we've been facing in the past few weeks would have taken months to do. We've been able to conduct that in about 15 days. And that's very critical when you have large data sets, is what I'll say.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, and I appreciate you bringing up the fact that what the firm has put in place is really applicable across all organizations. From an investigation standpoint, it's not a function of if but when and how you respond, and the people that you have lined up are, regardless of whether they're in a firm or a corporate legal department, you need to make sure that you're entrusting them with what their responsibilities, their authority, and whatnot, and that goes for no matter what the size of the organization. Absolutely. Now, when we first were talking about this topic, it was not as stressful, I imagine, for you, because you didn't have an active ongoing project.
I didn't have an active investigation going on. It was much broader.
But you had put it together, these processes and the partnerships and the relationships and the technology that you needed to be able to respond from historical investigations. And I think that's so important, not just to know exactly what the playbook is, but also to recognize that it might have to be tweaked. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about sort of, the repeatable processes that you were able to use previously and how you've optimized and leveraged them in the past few weeks to respond today?
Sure. So I'll talk about the process and how we kind of learned and what we put together, and then I'll give you a couple of examples of how it's truly come to life with everything. So I'm going to talk about this from really discovery and investigatory technology and things like that is really what you're going to hear me say. So what we learned about a year ago, as I said, we had the great people in place, but we didn't have the right technology or the right partnerships in place. And we had each person kind of doing their own thing. So what we initially had to do is we started kind of looking at our process and determining how we can better improve that. Mm-hmm. A lot of times when you're talking to your staff, and I know my staff are similar to this and every other companies are as well, if they're overwhelmed, it's usually due to one of many reasons. It could be there's too many projects that they're doing, and you've got to deal with that scenario. It could be that we're not communicating expectations accordingly to higher level, and we're failing on some of that. Or it could be that we don't have the right process in place to be as effective as possible. And what we learned, like I said, about a year ago or so, is that we were failing in our process. We had our risk team that were doing their pieces over here. We had the client value team and the ethics component doing their pieces here. And we had the technological team doing their pieces. So what we did is we brought in our process improvement team. We documented what was being done, and then we started to document and improve that process along the way. When you do that, and when you stop for a moment and you try to determine what are all the moving parts versus just the firefighting of it, you start to figure out where you're failing. And you start to figure out where you're duplicating efforts, and you're wasting time, and you're wasting money, and you're wasting resources. And what we determined is, okay, here are the fail moments. And as I referenced, we had great technology that could, I'm going to equate it to kind of like a medical procedure. We had great technology that could say, okay, the body has cancer. That's what so I know that. So it's somewhere in the body. But we didn't have technology that could say, oh, it's limited to just this leg, and it's limited to either a tissue or a tendon or something like that. We didn't have scalpel type technology that would allow us to understand the data and the risk associated with that data. So we could understand the body had a problem, but we couldn't figure out how to treat the problem, in a sense. Mm-hmm. So what we ended up doing is partnering with Disco. And we went through a series of tests with different types of technology that we were specifically looking for the scalpel type approach with the data. And that's really what we needed to do. So when we talked, I remember when we talked with you guys initially, we were specifically looking for any kind of tech that could help us learn quickly, that could help us focus on data privacy issues, client obligation issues, and different notification components along the way. And we worked together to develop that type of process that became that machine. So we trained the Disco AI function on 700 plus rules that we worked together on to teach it to look for issues associated with privacy. So it looks for things like tax records, home addresses, email addresses associated with additional context. It looks for anything that is associated with bills or billings, I should say, within that. It is amazing what you can train a system to do. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not. I'm not going to sit here and say that any artificial intelligence is perfect. It's just not. But what it can do is it can get you far along in the path far faster in your process. And by having Disco set up in that fashion, when we were facing our internal investigation that we were having back in February, which was around some employee attrition, we really applied those rules against that data set. And it was not an easy data set to apply it to. We had 30 million emails that needed to be analyzed. We had people that were leaving the organization, and in any organization, when you have people that are, when you have employee attrition, you have to understand what can they take and what can they not. What do they have rights to take for the representation that they're going to continue for certain clients and otherwise. So there's ethical pieces that need to happen, but then there's the data elements that need to happen. So in that scenario, we had to really partner with you guys at Disco to hone in on what were the items that we needed to remove to make certain didn't go outside of our walls of the organization, and to protect our employees and to protect our clients at the same time. So working together to create those processes and to create those rules, oh my gosh, the speed in which we were able to analyze 30 million emails was weeks and not months, because we could seriously if we had not had a tool like this, we would still be talking about that process because we'd still be undergoing that process months later. And this is something that we were beginning to deal with in January and February of this year, and we're now in November. I don't exaggerate in saying that, but anytime you have a data set of 30 million, anything, that's not going to be simplistic in its approach to attack it. And again, finding the technology, and I go back to my analogy of the medical analysis that gives you the scalpel-like approach to go in and go, that's an issue, and oh, it learned that these are similar issues over here. You might want to also take a look at this. You know, I said this a number of times, it's kind of my joke. You come out of a damp grotto into the light is really the way that it feels like that happens. And that's kind of how it felt when we were able to develop this machine and this factory process. We've used that process now a number of times. The first one just happened to be one of our largest investigations possible, but we've used it for other purposes. And I'll give you another really quick example that we're all facing, and that's the right to be forgotten. And I can't speak for anyone else, but every time you get served with a right to be forgotten, do you have the perfect technology to find any reference to that person who applied for a position? And if anyone says, yes, I can do it in minutes, great, call me because I want to learn from you, is what I will say. But we had to create a process to go and look for people's names across any of our different types of tech. And again, applying our processes that we've worked on with Disco, mainly to our email, but also to our document system where necessary, gives us that scalpel approach. So we don't have to put a hold on entire mailboxes or a hold on entire data sets. Yes, I've found where the cancer is. It's in this exact spot. I'm going to go remove it and destroy that. And that's very critical for us, having that ability to comply where necessary, having the ability to manage risk of the organization. Those are just two of the things that we've gained from the creation of this factory and this process.
I mean, that's so amazing to hear, in particular, how you're leveraging the robust tools and technology that are traditionally used for e-discovery and litigation for many other use cases. And I think that's often not thought about, as e-discovery is for just large scale, document review and production and teams of attorneys. But the reality is, when we at Disco in particular are putting together how we're going to design and build the product, we're thinking about the entire practice of law and essentially ensuring that speed and performance is always at the forefront of our platform to enable attorneys to find information. It doesn't just have to be for a document production, to find information quickly, and providing that scalpel, but also the other types of tools that you might need to do to perform the surgery, whether it is fast, lightning fast speed, search, ability to quickly scan through documents, identify what we call enrichment, as what you refer to as, the similarity in concepts, so that you just get a broad understanding of whatever enterprise data has been put into that platform. I recall my time at Google when we had an in-house EDiscovery platform, and I walked down the hall to the team that was responsible for responding to the right to be forgotten requests. And they were using completely separate tools. And thought, there's actually, at the core, what we're talking about is search and finding evidence, finding facts, and putting together information and patterns. And the outcome for EDiscovery is a document production, but for an investigation or any other response is something different. And it's just empowering and enabling that type of workflow using a creative use case.
I agree. I actually hate the term EDiscovery. It's discovery. It just is, and it's about looking at the tool for more than what it says it is, because sometimes the tool doesn't even know that it is bigger than it is, and that's kind of how we look at you guys at Disco. Is it may say EDiscovery, but it's such a broader concept, and we really look at you guys as investigatory technology. You help us in a way that any company needs to be supported.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly what we try to be. Now, your firm has such an interesting approach, too, of identifying what partners and what solutions to bring in at what moment that I've certainly really enjoyed hearing about. I'd love if you could talk a little bit about that process of, you can identify what problems you anticipate to happen, or perhaps they present themselves to you when you don't expect them, and how you find that right partnership, the right people, the right technology in the process.
Yeah. So we do have a unique concept. A lot of times people will say POC, or proof of concept, when you're trying to test out something, but that doesn't always help. Proof of concept is very limited. It's conceptually, does a piece of technology work, or does a process work? And that's great, and you still need to know that, don't get me wrong, but we use a term called proof of value. So POV is what we actually call items. So what we typically will do when we're getting ready to test or to partner with another group is we will put together what we consider value-added success factors of what's it going to look like if we are successful in this? What is going to bring the most value? So that's what we're trying to prove when we're actually testing a piece of tech or testing a process or testing a partnership is this partnership valuable? Is this technology bringing the value that it said it was going to deliver? Is there ROI? Is there speed? Is there quality? Is there accuracy? What is it that it's delivering to me? Not conceptually does it work, because I could have told you within 2 minutes of Disco of us reviewing the Disco product that it works fabulously. It can consume large data sets. It can analyze large data sets. It conceptually works. But the value for what we were looking for, particularly under the investigation piece of this, is it going to add value to our process? We knew that time was of the essence. That was the highest item that we needed, was to gain back time and high quality of delivery behind that investigation. You have to be right. You have to be right, very, very accurate in the analysis, because it's driving business decisions and risk decisions, and sometimes litigation, and sometimes insurance decisions. So many things are driven by that accuracy. So we needed to gain time back. We needed to gain accuracy. And our assessment with Disco is, if we had done this manually, what would have been our time? And if we had done this manually, what would have been the accuracy ratings of all of that? And what we typically find when we are doing POVs, like we did here, looking for investigation type of technology, is that human accuracy is fairly high. But there are elements to that. And, when we were doing things manually, we would make certain that 2 to 3 people were reviewing certain data sets. That's a lot of eyes and a lot of hours on a specific data. So when you get to accuracy ratings, the human aspect can be anywhere between 80 to 90% accurate. The technology rating can be around that same. Where you really get to the highest accuracy is when you combine them both together. And that's what we found, and we find that a lot of times in our proof of value, is the individual has got great accuracy when they're pointed and looking at that. The technology will have good accuracy as well. But when you combine them and you have the actual individual training that technology and you combine those together, the accuracy, it spikes even higher than that. So that's how we approach this, is that proof of value, and again, building out those success factors of what does value look like. And if you go and you approach the partnership opportunity, the process opportunity, the technology opportunity in that fashion, you're going to be far happier with the end result versus just conceptually, does it work?
Yes, absolutely. And it's really perhaps not easy, but easier to quantify the value add that technology brings when you're talking about, what I would say is a relatively large case of 30 million documents. It's certainly not in the largest that we've seen, because we handle so many matters every year, but it's large. What about when it's smaller? I mean, do you justify trying to leverage that same technology if you're talking about 30,000 documents or 3,000? And tell us a little bit about that, because I think when there's fire burning in front of you, it's obvious that you have to do something to scale. But what about when it's just a little match that's been lit, or maybe not a cancer in that body of yours, but just rather a muscle strain.
A tendon pull. That's what we'll say.
Yeah.
It again goes back to your process. So in our process mapping around investigations, the level of that also, it branches out to multiple kind of levels within that. What I will say is, like in some of our investigations, they're tiny. It's a small data set. We've had one recently where it's exactly 31,216 items. So to your example is very, very odd how you reference that. And again, going back to what brings us value, accuracy and time, being able to deliver upon something rapidly with a high level of accuracy so that we can get back to our day-to-day, that's huge for us. And, I don't want to speak for anyone else. I don't have a huge team of investigators just sitting around waiting on an investigation to happen. It's incredibly, incredibly disruptive when an investigation happens. And we, I think about the past few weeks alone, you basically had to clear calendars for days just to focus on what was the initial analysis. That's how it works. We each have other jobs, and we all have compliance teams, and that's typically who comes forth and starts to run the investigation. But it's incredibly disruptive to the team. So even when it's a small set of data, being able to gain the accuracy and the time back so that we can focus on the operations of the organization and the broader data protection of the organization is critical. And so that, to me, the process, you've got different scales of process. You've got your light version, your medium version, and your heavy version. Whether it's a hangnail, a muscle strain, or a full-blown cutting off of the leg. In any scenario, you've got to attack it. And whatever's going to help you get there in that time period that allows you to get back to the day-to-day, that's going to be very critical.
Yeah, that's excellent. And we've talked a lot about, one of the things that we work with a lot of our other clients on is, you mentioned earlier, setting up rules and tags and things like that, is how you then go and leverage that when you have a similar subject matter that comes up. So it's not the same starting point every time. You're inching along, the field, as the more and more you learn, the more and more content that you're putting into a platform like Disco, where you can start leveraging the AI right out the gate, especially as you put up in that.
I would agree. You have a playbook in a sense.
Right.
And, whereas a year and a half ago, we didn't have a playbook. We had what was in our heads of a playbook, but we couldn't accomplish that as quickly as we needed to do. And having that playbook, having that incident response team, both that was internal as well as external, having those partnerships in place it still allows us to respond in a much more rapid fashion. And that's what we've been looking for.
What's really interesting is I think about the folks that would be in a solutions lab like this. Many of us, I'm not a lawyer, but I sort of play one on TV, as I like to say. I have been working for attorneys for my entire career, and I just love the cross-section of technology and the practice of law, which is how I got to sort of where I am today. And it strikes me that many folks in the legal operations community are like-minded in that we often know what we will do. We often know what the steps are and who to bring in. But the value comes when we write it down and we disseminate that information and share, so that there's, to put the starting line a little bit further ahead than starting from scratch every single time. So I really appreciate that. Now, you mentioned something earlier that I wanted to double click on too, the process improvement team. You brought the process improvement team in, and that's not necessarily what I consider a standard approach at the firms. And so can you tell us any more about how that team engages on these processes, when you're in the beginning, middle, and end of any of these workflows or investigations that are just starting up?
Could you repeat that last part just one more time? I apologize. There was background noise in my house. I couldn't hear what you just said. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. There's also a thunderstorm here in Austin, so that's why you keep seeing lights flashing. It feels like there's lightning right outside my office window right now. So what are the things that you brought up? You said we brought in our process improvement team to evaluate what we needed to do, and that's I don't hear that often from other firms that I'm talking to, that they dedicated resources to that. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about how those folks engage in the beginning, in the middle, and after an investigation has wrapped, with the folks that are sort of in the trenches responding to the issues.
Sure. So we have a full process improvement team. It sits under our LPM team, so one of the teams that's under client value. And that team of people are process experts. They really are. They're far more acknowledged in that space than I could ever pretend to be. And they think through things very differently, very engineer-esque is the best explanation I can provide to that. And the way that you really want to think about anything, and they've taught me this over the past few years, is you look at the pre-engagement, the engagement, and the post-engagement. And that can be applied to any scenario that you really want. So it goes back to your beginning, your middle, and your end analysis. So when we were trying to attack this, and I go back to the earlier statement that I made around anytime your people are overwhelmed, it could be related to a process being broken. There are a number of times our processes, it's not that they're broken, it's not that they weren't great when they were initially put into place, but they've just changed over time. And with the amount of regulatory impact that we have as organizations today, your processes have to change with that. So we have people that, no matter if it's a matter process or if it's an investigation process similar to this, that will sit us down and we talk through how do we attack the problem today. And that's basically what we did a little over a year ago, is trying to solve the problem of always fighting the fires, but not actually accomplishing anything. And we needed to learn from our mistakes. We needed to learn from the processes that had worked but that needed to change over a period of time, and to figure out where we needed different types of technology to help us improve our processes. So we engaged with them. Is it fun work? No, but you need to sit down and you simply talk. You simply talk about your processes that you're undergoing and how you attack. Okay, we get a right to be forgotten. What's next? Okay, we engage GTS, which is our technology team. Okay, we look at email. Okay, we do this. And you're simply talking through your process to document it accordingly. We use a system called BlueWorks, which allows us to document workflow processes and branching of processes. And it looks at swim lanes of who is in charge of each one of those processes and such like that. So once you map that, then you can start to hone in on where your breakage points are, where you're not as effective as you possibly need to be. And what I will say, in looking at it in looking at it while we're engaging in an investigation, one of the biggest things that people fail to do, and we're getting ready to start this process with the current investigation that we've been undergoing, is your post learnings. If you don't learn from what you did well and what you did bad, you can't improve it along the way. And the world changes around you. So if you're not constantly looking at that process improvement opportunity, you're going to fail, or you're going to end up with an obsolete process down the road. So for us, it's incredibly important for us to stop. Okay, here's an hour on the past 3 weeks. what went really well, where did we have issues, where do we run into hiccups, how fast were we able to respond to this, and then, okay, now what do we need to improve? What's the knowledge that we can gain from that? And how do we improve both the system, the rules, the people, the process, all of the above? One of the areas that I would say absolutely is very critical for constant process improvement is your rule development. And, we're going to learn from the past few weeks alone some rules that we want to add. We started with a few hundred. We advanced that to 700 over a course of about a month. I can guarantee you we're going to have a number of additional items in different languages that we're going to want to add into that system, looking for additional terms that we had not even thought about. And that's going to be very critical. I also, in the back of my mind, am thinking about the China privacy law that's just recently gone into existence and is going into effect right now, or I should say at the end of this month. We've got to start thinking about what additional rule set do we need to comply there, because we're going to have investigations in Asia. And I want to make certain that we're able to accommodate that now, not 2 months from now when we're in an engagement. And that's really, it's that constant learning and applying that knowledge back into your process so that you can improve that along the way.
That's amazing. And ironically, one of the things that we say at Disco is sort of when we're building software, if you're in a part of the code that you can go and update, think about it now when this patient is on the table. That's literally what, the way in which our CTO talks about it. Patients on the table, let's go fix the other things that are the problem.
Yeah.
Not just the cancer there.
That's exactly right. You find things that you don't expect to find. I can promise you over the past 3 weeks that we have found different things that we were not anticipating finding. And now as we're moving into our lessons learned phase and our post-engagement phase of this, we're absolutely going to start putting those lessons learned back into it.
Yeah, I'm going to apologize here and turn my camera off because it seems that the Austin thunderstorms is impacting my stream here. If I'm sitting in the audience listening to us today, I think there's no doubt that process efficiencies are what we're all trying to gain, but there is a difficulty in making the budget justification sometimes to go and do that, because it's the prevention of what might happen, or the thinking through the risks of events. Do you have any recommendations or advice on how people can make those asks, recognizing that the trade-offs are in the future? This isn't something that you're going and fixing necessarily today when you're in surgery, but rather preventing future surgeries.
I always equate it to a risk analysis is really the best explanation I can provide. So the investment that you make now will decrease the risk or potential loss to the organization at a later point in time. Right. And that's really the best way to think about that. Everything is a commercial analysis. Everything is a risk analysis. And you have to balance the commercial and the risk together. But I will say, sitting down and looking at your investigation process today, when you don't have an active investigation going on, is highly worthwhile. Because what it's going to allow you to do is to look at something with eyes that are not the firefighting eyes. Because when you're looking at something through the firefighting lens, you are focused in on the very specific issues that you have at hand that you're trying to accomplish. And you have 5,000 things other than that going on operationally that you're trying to take care of and to deal with. So if you do that now, you are going to decrease the risk perspective of the organization. And that helps you balance the commercial component of that. So that's how I would attack it. That's how I attack everything. Any investment that you're about to make, I look at it from 3 lenses. Is it going to increase our profitable revenue of the organization? You can ask that in anything that any company. Is it going to decrease your costs over time? And is it going to decrease your your risk? So if it's going to increase your profitability, decrease your costs, and decrease your risk, huge. And costs are not necessarily financial. Costs can be your people, your people that are overwhelmed, your people that are exhausted, the mental health of your people. It's all of that has to go into this, because when you're running an investigation, again, your people are tired. And if you don't have a tool set and a process and a playbook to go by, when that investigation is going to hit, not if, but when it hits, you're going to struggle, and you're going to have people that are going to be exhausted. They're going to miss things. So you're going to have the cost of your people, and then you're also going to have the risk of us getting it wrong. And that in and of itself can lead to fines. It can lead to missed deadlines. I think about like GDPR risks and the privacy review. In some countries, you have 72 hours to notify the government or the people involved that there's been a potential data breach. Imagine if you missed that deadline. Imagine the fines associated with that. Right. So the cost to the organization and that risk to the organization balanced out with the commercial impact of budgeting for this. To me, there's just no better answer to say, if you prepare for it now, you're going to save that organization from the loss of your people, the loss of the potential money, and the loss of your brand in an organization.
That's absolutely right. I mean, it's a little bit about go slow to go fast, right? You want to take the steps and the preparation in advance so that when you have these 72-hour turnaround times, you're able to execute on those. And when you do that, looking at that investigations with a clear head, clear mind, it's like that your surgeon has gotten a good night's rest and is operating on the right leg instead of the left, or the appropriate.
Right. You hope so.
One would hope. I mean, that's amazing. I also appreciate that you brought up the people component to this. With where we are today, the war for talent in so many industries and burnout being real. We're all used to burning the midnight oil for short stints in particular, right? That's just the nature of the business that we're in. But with the war for talent, how competitive things are, it is really important to take the steps necessary to ensure that you're setting your folks up for success and not for burnout or wanting to move.
Because it becomes a risk of both loss of those people and getting things wrong for the organization.
That's right. And the stakes can be very high, in particular when you're talking about an investigation. Anything specific that, you mentioned a few other examples of what you've learned in this particular investigation, changing rules, thinking about China, any other tips or tricks, tidbits that you have learned so far that you'd like to share with those that are trying to furiously take notes on how they can go back to their organizations and improve their investigations process?
Yeah, what I would say is, we've talked about going at it from a clear lens. The preparatory work cannot be overstated in that. One of the things that we've been focused on very much within Shearman is what we call our incident response team. Mm-hmm. And that team is not sitting under one of our business services units. It's sitting across all of them. And it goes back to kind of one of the things that we talk about often at Shearman is collaboration, and building this, what we call a hybrid team of people, some that are within the firm, some that are sitting at Disco, some that are sitting at outside consultants that help guide us, some with, our outside counsel as well. And depending upon, the branching off of that matrix and that process that we have determines who is involved and when. So having your different levels of your incident response team planned so that those people know when they need to be ready and available, in a sense, for something, and who's the backup. Because here's the other thing, at different points in time, people are on planes, people are unavailable, and right. Who's the backup to be a decision maker for those different pieces of the puzzle. So having your process map is incredibly critical. Having your technology partners chosen so that you have the right technology pieces along the way, very critical. Having that trained is very critical. But creating that incident response team that is understanding of the nature of the request, the nature of the investigation, can attack it in whatever level it needs to be attacked, large or small. Whether it's the 30 million or the 31,216, and that number is just emblazed in my brain at the moment. Having that team of people prepped, ready, the backups ready, it allows you again to approach this not from the firefighting perspective, although we are firefighting, don't get me wrong, but you're trained. You know how to run up the stairs with all the equipment on. You know how to attack, the situation if it's coming from this direction or from that direction. and having that team really readily available allows the team not to be burned out, allows them to continue the day job as necessary while we're able to deal with the fire at hand. And just really helps the overall risk profile of the organization to decrease. And that's one that I can't speak highly enough. What we did at Shearman is we actually drafted a full incident response policy, procedure, team listing, all of it. And we have it all documented purposely so. And we have it that way so that we have our playbook. It's what we have. We have it on one PowerPoint slide for management so that it's not overwhelming for them. But that way it allows them to see the roles of people that are involved at different points in time and different levels. But it allows us to have our playbook of how to attack the problem when it comes along.
Yeah, that's absolutely excellent to think about. You're 100% right. People need to know who needs to wake up in the middle of the night to the extent that these things occur and what that expectation is, because the worst thing to do is trying to figure that out within that 72-hour window per se.
Exactly. Who's getting the phone call at 2 a.m. and what kind of special ring do I have on my phone so it makes certain to wake me up at 2 a.m. It's always the critical element.
Absolutely, and hopefully it doesn't happen too frequently. I'm going to just remind the folks that are listening, in case there's any other questions, Meredith is a wealth of knowledge and always has great analogies as well. So if anybody else has questions, please chime in here as we would come to the top of the hour. But what else is going to come out of what you're working on today? Sort of what do you think are the next steps for the organization, and where this will sort of transform into 22, 23 as you think about how the organization is going to change and grow and shift to the regulations that are coming out, the different way in which people work? What are the other considerations that you're thinking about or your leadership team are thinking about?
Yeah, what I can tell you is it's always maturity of the process. Once you have your base done, it's maturity of that process and honing that process even further, and honing your team even further. So one of the things that Shearman has done is, we've done a really, really, really good job of creating this, what we call data trifecta, or data protection trifecta is what I should say. And we couldn't do it all at once. We had to kind of bring it along in the journey. So the first piece of that is we created our data security team, focused on that piece of the puzzle. Then we had to focus our next piece in our maturity on the data privacy elements of that and the regulatory compliance behind that. The third piece that we began earlier this year is what we call our data governance team. And you need all three. You need to look at data from building the moat around the data to making certain that we're complying with all the rules to separating the data once the bad actor might get behind your own firewall. And you have to really think about that. So having us maturing in our processes along this way has been very critical. Are we done in our journey? No, we're not. We're going to continue to do that. But having that leadership level in place to be able to respond, to be able to manage our data protection program from start to finish every single day is very critical. But then to pivot and to be able to manage the investigations and comply as quickly as possible has been kind of that next step in the maturity elevation for us. And we'll continue. Anytime you're dealing with investigations, anytime you're dealing with data and data protection, the journey is never over. It's never over.
Yes, the finish line will always be moving.
The goal line's always moving.
Always. That's right. Well, we have one brave soul. Heather from Morrison and Forrester has asked a question here. What types of high-level tasks are in your playbook? 700 business rules certainly sounds like a lot.
It sounds like a lot. We didn't start with 700. That developed over an active investigation. That's what I will say. The high-level tasks are okay. Like for example, when an incident happens, let's just say we're going to use something that has not happened in my time at Shearman, but is absolutely something that we are focused on preventing, and that's a data breach. So let's just say a data breach were to happen. Who are the first people to get communicated with? At what level do we start bringing in additional management components? We have a communication stream to make certain that certain people are involved with that aspect so that decisions can be made. We have a working group of individuals that are focused on the actual technological investigation of what something has happened. We have an active team that is focused on getting the business up and running if we have an attack of any way. We have a team that is focused on the data element and going in with that scalpel, as we kind of talked about, to understand the data impact. So there's multiple high-level teams and multiple high-level tasks associated with each one of those subsets. We have a lot of partnerships. Like, as I referenced, the data partnership we have is with Disco. The technological partnership we have is with a company called Signia. They walk us through every possible scenario that could happen with any bad actor out there, and they're fabulous. And if anyone wants to reach out to me afterwards, I'll gladly make connections with people if you would ever like that. On the data side, start with what you know. And what we knew is we went to the GDPR and CCPA rules of what data points were protected, email addresses with context of additional things around geography, other things along those lines. You can simply start to build the rules right off of what the laws state and what data is actually protected. So start small, start with what you know, and just start breaking down those elements that are protected to build that in. Like I said, we have our entire incident response on one PowerPoint slide, and there's a lot on there because of all the work streams that go and who's involved in what different component of it. But find your right partnerships, and I think I see someone, Signia, referencing them from Morrison & Foerster. Absolutely, they're a great company that we've worked with at least now for my 3 years being with Shearman.
That's great. It's I love thinking about, apply your own resources at what you excel at, what you're able to do, and then go and find the ones that are going to partner with you because they have an expertise or experience process technology that you're not otherwise going to build yourself.
That's exactly right.
I often have this conversation as we talk about data security and the cloud and thinking about, what I'm going to trust, Amazon Web Services for their data security much better than I am if I'm going to go try and set up a server in my office, right?
They spend billions on doing that, so you should.
Yeah, they've been doing this quite a while, and so leveraging the expertise of others and recognizing where your strengths are and where you want to be strong, and then where you're going to partner with others. And we certainly want to take that approach with all of our clients as well. As we have our professional services and managed review organizations, we like to think of ourselves as an extension of your own team. So we can be with you there on every single case all along the way, or as that burst capacity when that's needed, just to be flexible. Because there are times where you have the expertise and there are times where we can provide some expertise as well if it's something that new.
I could not agree with that more. I've referenced the term hybrid team a number of times while we've been on this call. I think my cohort here at Shearman, our CTO Lawrence Baxter, says it often: you build, buy, or partner, and we partner a lot. Is really what we do. We're never going to be able to hire some of the people that we work with at the different companies that we work with. And, there's a reason why we call it a hybrid team. We do have certain leaders within the organization that are focused on these areas and focused on the incident response, as I've kind of referenced within this, and focused on the investigation. But when it comes to that scalpel removal, when you're looking for the neurosurgeon in each one of those processes, you're not always going to hire the neurosurgeon within your company. You're going to need to go find and partner with them. And there's a lot of really, really fantastic companies out there that focus in on data security elements, technology investigations, data investigations. Find them. Start sitting down now and start thinking about your processes that, if you were to be served for the right to be forgotten, a destruction order from a court, what would you do? How would you do it today? Are you optimized in your processes right now to go in with a scalpel and deal with that information? Are you? And we weren't. And, again, we're still learning and we're still improving our processes along the way to get even better and more precise with how we attack some of those problems. So find your partners, find those specialists that have that expertise and do that now. So that way, when you're dealing with the fire, when you're dealing with that that investigation because it's hit you at 2 a.m. and you're now having to deal with that, you have those partners that are going to push that boulder up the hill with you, and you're not doing it alone.
That's amazing. And just, I want to say thank you for taking the time to meet with us today while you're in the middle of firefighting. Any final thoughts or comments for those that are listening out there?
Just start somewhere. Do it now while you're not in the middle of something. Do it with clarity. Reach out to those who've dealt with this before. Learn from their mistakes. I learned from others' mistakes. Please learn from mine. And I think we're all a great community of people to help and to share with each other. So please feel free to reach out to me personally over email if anyone would like to learn more about some of the subsets.
Well, thanks so much. I will try to put my camera on to say goodbye. I think the lightning here in Austin has stopped. So thanks again for the questions and for the participation here. Really appreciate your time, Meredith, as always.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you both, Kristen and Meredith. It was a great conversation, and thank you for sharing all your tips and tricks. And once again, we're recording today's session, so you'll receive a recording following probably by tomorrow with a link if you want to come back and watch and listen for any more advice that Meredith and Kristen have shared today. Thank you to Disco for your sponsorship, and we look forward to seeing you on the next CLOC webinar.
All right.